Welcome everybody to 52 Living Ideas. We are going through this presentation on patterns that I have observed between the Bible, Tao Te Ching, and Bhagavad Gita. And I'm connecting it up to everything I know. So first part will focus on I'll focus on identifying 4 patterns. This is the first 4 slides. And then I'm going to talk about my personal take on it. And then we will go to questions slide by slide, and then we'll go to general questions. That's the format. Let me get started. This is the most important slide. This is the first slide. Okay. In the past, I have thought of it in terms of function and form. These are the terms of Louis Sullivan. That function creates its own form. And form follows function. So this form and function are tied at the hip. Function is the living force that gives rise to forms. Forms depend on the function. I see this pattern in all these great works that we have seen. You can see the Bible starts with, "For God so loved the world." So this is God. This is function. The star represents function, and the green circle represents the world. So this is the star is the function. The green is the form. And the most important thing is that there is the function at the core of every form, and there is a seed of form inside every function. So they are tied. They're tied at the hip. Can't think of them as separate. They are together all the time. So let's talk about, God so loved the world. He loved the world, so he created the world. Okay, we'll talk about the further story. The Tao is the principle. It is the way in which nature functions. That's the star here. And it creates 10,000 things. That's the world. Okay. Krishna is the God, and he manifests himself in things. There is a spirit and there is matter, and they're together. So there is spirit shaping matter. This is what you see here. And spirit always has it is basically the spirit of matter. So they are together. In Aristotelian terms, this is the efficient cause, the things that drives and shapes things. This is the material cause. In science, this is the scientific principles, the natural laws of nature. And this is the natural world. The natural world is shaped by the natural laws. Okay, so that is the first slide. Now, again, keep track of all the questions. This is slide number 2. You can see that number over here. Keep track of all the questions that you have on each of these things. Even if you don't want to ask me the questions, go ahead and go to the next one. Okay. Rupali, there is some, I don't know how it is, but there is some. Let me see if I can rub this off. Let me just try to bring it up again. Okay, hold on. Okay, there. Okay, thank you, Rupali. Okay, now I want to go to the second. Let me go back to the first slide for a second here. So this is the first one. Okay, this is spirit and matter. I think of it in terms of function and form. Okay, and the principle here is form follows function. function creates its own form. Okay. All right. Next up, I want to point out one thing that is common to the Bible, Tao Te Ching, and Bhagavad Gita, and which is very prominent in them, which is missing from the modern Western world, which is not as focused on. And that is this idea of I am. It is your concept of I, whether it is, you call it your soul, your spirit, your will, the center of your being, the Tao in you, the Atman, your consciousness, the deepest part of you, your capacity to love. That is this. So there is God, there is the world, and there is I. This is a very deep part of all these three. Okay, this is slide number 3. We will come at these points in multiple ways. Next point I want to make is the idea of functionated forms. That form and function are tied together, or always thought of as together. This is spirituality of the material. This is heaven on earth. This is Jesus being 100% God and 100% man. This is about Krishna coming to earth in different avatars. This is about the concept of sage who carries within him the principle of the Tao and acts according to it. These two things being together, always thought of as together. Now, the reason this seems like a simple point, but somewhere around 80 to 90% of all thought in the Western world, and quite a bit of thought in the Eastern world, actually denies this. So this is a minority position. This is an Aristotelian position that concepts and abstractions are tied at the hips. Abstractions come from the concretes and they are applied to concretes. There is a loop going back and forth between the two incessantly, which animates both of them. And you cannot understand one without the other. There are two, the opposite view of that is the idea of dichotomy. There are multiple forms of it. There is materialism, which holds that there is only matter. This spirit is unreal. There is subjectivism, which says whatever I feel like, which is effectively just focused on the material thing right around you, unaware of the principles of nature, unaware of your own spirit. And then there is Platonism, which is a kind of subjectivism which pretends to be focused on the spirit. But it is, again, it's kind of a delusional way of thinking about what is there in your consciousness. Without having feedback from the material world, it is based on despise of the world and trying to produce something inside of you, which effectively is something that was there. That is, it's like subjectivism. It's like pretend subjectivism. It's subjectivism which is pretending to be spiritual. But this idea of function and form being together is the most important idea. And this is a minority idea in today's culture. This is the Aristotelian idea. So most of the people, even most of the thought on religions is Platonic. A lot of the thought in religions is Platonic. So this is a very deep point. Finally, the fourth point general point I want to make is that we have talked about these two. We've talked about the spirit with the seed of matter in it, and we have talked about the matter with the seed of spirit animating it. There are two other processes. These two that we talked about, let me go back here. These two that we talked about is metaphysics. This is just what is. Okay. Now we are going to talk about the processes. There is a process of concentration, of going from the concretes to abstracts, from the 10,000 things to the Tao. This is a process of induction. This is a process of using words. This is the Jnana Yoga. This is what Ashwapati does. This is what science is all about, observing things about the world and bringing them all in to form the core principles. This is what thinking, especially in this here I'm referring to inductive thinking, is about. This is all about formal causes of Aristotle. There is the other side, which is the expanding side, which is the yin, which is about love of the world. This is bhakti yoga, as opposed to jnana yoga. This is what Savitri does. She brings heaven down to earth. This is about applying of ideas that you've come up with. This is about final causes. This is about feelings. This is about art. This is about expression. So you're taking in stuff from the world, formulating a vision in your spirit, deciding that, and then putting it out into the world, transforming the world. So this is a loop. Now, some of these religions and ways of thinking are stronger at one than the other. So there are differences in that. All right. So let's see. So that was very quick. So this is slide number 5. So let me just go through all the slides, these slides. So this is slide number 2, form and function. Slide number 2 is the concept of I am. Slide number 3 is the unity of form and function. And slide number 5, sorry, is about the yin yang, about expanding and concentrating processes through which these operate. Okay. Now I'm going to talk about my personal take on these. Okay, and I'm going to use mostly diagrams with very little words to do that. So let's look at this diagram again. Okay. So imagine yourself in this position. See, this is actually a person. Okay, this is the head. These are your 2 arms. This are the legs you're standing on. Okay. And you're in love with the world of what you're trying to do. Okay. So this is you. You're standing, again, this is you in the world over here. This is the world all around you. That's what you're standing on. Okay. Your right hand, which is connected to your left brain, is your inductive process. You're taking things in from the world. Imagine with your right hand, you're pulling things in. Okay. And with your left hand, you're expressing what you have. Okay. So this is the OODA loop, for example. This entire blue is orientation. You're observing the world. You're orienting. Observing is the green. You're orienting. You're inducing from it. You're pulling everything in. Here, you're deciding that this is what the vision is. This is what the meaning of life is. This is what the meaning of this current situation is. This is the star. And then you're expressing that through the action. And then you're observing. So this is the OODA loop. Okay. So I find this right and left to be very, very helpful. Okay. So this is my quick take on this. Let me talk more about this in terms of the three great works. So this was, I think, John 3. It says, God so loved the world. This is God. He so loved the world that he created the world. He sent his son, which is an act of grace through this red. This is the expression of God's love. And now Jesus stands here now. Okay. What does he do? He is getting rid of the sin of the world. What is sin of the world? Is basically material things which are going away from the spirit. Okay. He's getting rid of that, and he's giving a path back. He's showing you the path. He's the word. He's the explication. He's the model of how do you go from here to here. And what is the net result of it? It basically produces love in the heart for God and for each other. So it is now, this is a person standing. What it is providing him is the love, which is the Holy Spirit, which is not only just love of each other, the world, and God, which allows you to do the work to get here. So that's how I see the Bible in this diagram. The Tao is here. The Tao is this yellow star. The Tao animates. You can look at this picture here. Tao animates the world. Most of the words that people are using are really about this, not about the Tao. So it is very skeptical about the words that have been used. They don't think, Lao Tzu thinks that most of the words that have been used are about the world itself and doesn't really capture the spirit. So he again and again and again and again points out that there is this Tao. And what does a sage do? Sage establishes this Tao in his heart so that he can act according to it. This is what Wu Wei is about. It is effortless action, because it is moving along the lines of nature as opposed to going all over the place. So this is how I see the Tao. This is Krishna in Bhagavad Gita. Over here, this star. Whenever the world gets very messy and it is going away from the spirit, he incarnates himself on the world, in the world, in order to destroy things which are going against the spirit and to provide a path back to this. In Gita, there are 4 ways of the path. One is the Raja Yoga or Dhyana Yoga, which is about concentrating on the nature of the divine. So this is your Atma, and this one is the Brahman. So being focused on that without being distracted by things that are going hither and thither. So that's about Raja Yoga, of concentration on this. There is Jnana Yoga, which is this blue, actually figuring out how all of this is working, putting it into words and having the knowledge to get there. There is Bhakti Yoga, where you establish this in your heart and it is your devotion through which you get there. And then there is Karma Yoga, where you understand it and you act that out in your life here, in your work. So those are the 4 yogas in the Bhagavad Gita tradition. Okay, so if you have any questions about this, this is slide number 7. Now let me go to slide number 8. Now this is interaction between 2. We've so far looked at 1. So imagine this in terms of it being on your phone. Like I like to keep this like this, for example, right? So this is on the phone. And imagine you're holding it like this. So you are here, you are right here. This is the core of you. Okay. And this, I'm going to show you 3 different ways you can use this diagram. At the deepest level, this is God. It's really between you and God. Like, for example, when you're singing in Indian classical music, it is between you and God. Whenever you are worshiping in the Bible tradition, it's between you and God. Whenever the sage is thinking about it in the Taoist tradition, it is between you, the core of you, and the Tao. So it is I and Thou. Thou as God, as Brahman, or as Tao, or as nature, the law of nature. See, this is completely consistent with I see it as being completely consistent with the secular view. This is your will, this is your spirit, and this is the law of nature. It is what it is. The way you interact with it is by understanding its works. Jesus says you don't have direct access to God. What Jesus has given is an example of it. What you're doing is that this is about Jnana Yoga in the Indian tradition. You try to figure it out based on everything that you can see yourself. Have that vision of what it means and then express it in your own life to transform the world. So this serves as an inspiration to transform the world. So this is one use of it. The second use of it is something that Martin Buber does a fantastic job in his book, I, Thou. Think of this as another person that you're talking to. And look at how deep a view of human relations this is. You're saying, I have a spirit and that person has a spirit. You have profound respect. So when in Indian tradition, when you say namaste, you're saying the God in me greets the God in you. This is the God in me greeting the God in you. The point here is that this external world, whether it is the words that you speak, your actions, is the intermediary between the two spirits. And that's what gives it its grace, its power, its beauty. So that's what work is about. So now what you do is that you are taking in what the person has said, the person's actions. You're figuring it out. You're relating it, not just reacting. See, if you're reacting, you're just reacting over here in the green itself. You are trying to relate it to the spirit. And here, in that sense, you're relating it to God. You're relating it to the deepest principles that you know, the deepest part of you. And then you're reacting from that. Now, each of us has very different experiences. We have different perspectives. So what is going on here is actually a figure 8 like this. Okay, so let me give you the example of this particular meetup that we are doing. So this is my third example, the third use in communication. I have just, by the way, just looked at this. I just pointed to the I-thou idea in human relations with Martin Buber. There is a lot of, this is about authentic relating that Carl Roger talks about. So there is a lot to be said about that, but I want to make it more concretized right now by just talking about this, what we are doing right now. Okay. So I looked at what we have done on Tao Te Ching, on the Bible, and on Bhagavad Gita. And I tried to put it together as best as I could. And I have expressed it in this diagram that you're looking at, and in this presentation that I'm looking at, that we are both looking at. It's right here. This is the presentation. This is the core idea that I had of the presentation. What I'm saying to you is, please look at this, each slide. Try to come up with questions that you have, observations that you have. Look at it at the deepest way you possibly can. Formulate those questions and then ask those questions, make those comments. I will listen to them as carefully as I can. I will try to relate them to the deepest ideas that I know, and I will respond to them, and so will others. So we are going through this process of 8. You see how deep this is. Most human interaction is actually happening here without touching the spirit, without touching the core principles that are governing the universe. It is just happening within the green. This is what is possible. This 8 figure is what is possible. So this is slide number 8, right? Let me go to the next one. Well, there is a way of simplifying this dramatically, is to look at the radial view of it. Okay, so you can see that before we had, this view, right? We started with this. So there are two things here, right? Two separate things. And there is an axis like this between them. Then we made it even more complicated by saying there are three things like this, okay? Then we added these to it. Okay, so there is stuff happening on this axis, there is stuff happening here, there is a relationship between this. Now I'm saying that it's possible to simplify it. Imagine you here standing on Earth. Okay, this is whole of Earth. You're standing here. Okay, and this is your ability to love the world right here. Okay. There is a continuous flow between you expressing yourself in the world and learning from the view. So there is a continuous loop going on like this. So that red is simply going out like this, and blue is simply coming in. And you can look at these, if you want to think of it in time, you can look at it as a stack of these circles. Okay, so there is a circle here, there is a circle here. You will keep on growing, the spirit will keep growing, the reality will, the world will keep getting better. So you can look at it as in sequence like that. So it's like this. So what you're doing is that you're taking in stuff from the world and you're expressing things. And this bright green is a new thing that was added to the world. Now, there is work needed, similar work needed to even keep things going. But this is an example of how this creates a new thing. Okay, this is slide number 10. The same diagram that we saw before of the I thou diagram, this one right here, you can put it like this. This is another version of that. Now, I want to jump. Let's see how we're doing on time. Okay, I want to jump and say that actually the world is like this. There are 8 billion of us. There are all these people. Okay, so imagine these are people standing. Okay, the extent to which, I want to point out one thing here in this diagram, the size of the spirit can vary. That depends on the amount of knowledge you have. And that will vary from area to area. So on some things you will be bigger in the core grasp of things than other people. Some things you're going to be smaller, and it doesn't matter. There is scope to work with people with different levels of knowledge, different levels of skill. And that will vary, like for example, in dancing, somebody may be much better. In something else, somebody may be, you may be better than somebody else. And so there is all kinds of relations between them. So these are all relative. Okay, so it's like this. Okay, and these kinds of loops are going on between people. And it's not just two people, it's like groups of people. There are all these relations going on, okay? And all these new things are being produced. Now, I couldn't really do a good job of fully capturing all of that. So this is my attempt to do that. And this is the final slide, okay? It's basically, it's something like this, what is actually the world is going on. There are people, okay? They are doing things, they are expressing things, and they are taking input, they are working together, and they're producing all of these things. There is actually, this is very disorganized. This is a very quick version. There is structure to the input and output functions. There is a structure between people on that, but this is a very quick way of doing that. So this is slide number 13. So now we are going to go back and do slide by slide. Give me just a second. I'm going to enable the chat fully so we can go ahead and talk about things slide by slide. Okay, so let's go back. So folks, you can go ahead and type an exclamation mark. We're going to first talk about slide number 1. You can try to keep your observations brief. So between 15 seconds to 45 seconds, it can be observations or it can be questions. And we will go from there. So go ahead and type an exclamation mark if you'd like to talk, if you'd like to share. And you can go ahead and also raise your hand in Zoom. Let's start with, let me make sure I can unmute everybody. All right. All right. So this was about how much? About 40 minutes or so. All right. Shane Murray, what do you think? And what's your question?
Okay, I apologize because there's so many questions coming forth here. But so what I was looking at when I raised the question was the Venn diagram, essentially where the part that converges in the center. I'm assuming between God and self, where that converges. That seems to be.
Which one?
It looked like a Venn diagram where there was a center point where there was some overlap. And I apologize because I did start late. It was a little bit after that. Like I said, it looked like a Venn diagram. Where
like
that
this?
Part.
Okay.
Yes. So the center point where there's convergence there, that seems to be super rare. And I'm assuming that it's the point of convergence. I'm assuming one can navigate to find themselves in that point of convergence more frequently than less frequently. And my question was, how do we find ourselves in that point of convergence, or that or that where we join there? Because it seems to be more often than not that we find ourselves outside of that point or those particular points.
Beautiful. Thank you. Thank you, Shane Murray. Appreciate that. Great question. All right. So folks, go ahead and keep type exclamation mark if you have questions. So what this is that this is firstly just the word. Okay. So in some ways, this world right here is typically what would happen is this is another way of looking at it. Okay. So this is a conversion. This is the same diagram. This is the conversion point. This is something that both of you are working together on. So it does take a lot of work in order to figure out things. And there are many people, so you can choose which ones, what things you want to work with people together. So sometimes, so you have to work. So firstly, it's a question of having clear purposes. Like if you have a clear purpose of what is worth doing, the other person has a clear purpose of what is worth doing, you can find something in common that's well worth working on. Because there are so many people, the intersections you can find and possibilities are very large. So you don't have to kind of say, okay, this is a person and I have to do this with them. You have multiple options of coming up with a scenario like that. So that's one thing. It is difficult the reason it is difficult to work really well, it's almost magical when it works well, is that you have to have profound respect between these two people. You have to say that, okay, you have produced this, the other person is going to go back and from the deepest ideas that they know, give you true feedback on that. And you have to be willing to take that on board and express yourself fully. So it speaks for one, a tremendous respect for the nature of reality, of both people saying that whatever is true, that's what I want. Whatever is good, that's what I want. Not many people get hung up on their egos. So they have created something and they just focus on that. So these are some of the issues that are involved here. Shane Murray, if you want to follow up, you can go ahead and ask.
Sure. I was just curious because I find myself struggling with the notion that perhaps it is my ego that's suggesting that there's meaning to what I might do, and so I just kind of stay behind. So I'm trying to understand how to navigate like an existence of meaning without it being driven by ego. And
Sure.
I think, you know what I mean? It's super hard to understand where ego is in play. And a lot of times I feel like silence is the answer, but I don't know. I'm curious how you like legitimately engage to unfold without letting ego be in play. Like
Wonderful. Thank you. So that's a great question. So see, ego. So what is ego? Ego is basically you getting focused on something that you yourself have created here in the world, whether it is outside of you or inside of you, and losing track with the core of you, the core of God, and core of other people. So that's what ego is, of basically focused on this without this. So it's basically, even when it was produced by this, it's like ego is basically you're holding on to dead forms. You are holding on to a form and ignoring the function within you that created it, ignoring the function in the universe itself and function in other people. The solution to that is to be, is being open, is to express yourself clearly and hear what other people have to say. I find that this loop, it is like flowing water. See, ego is like a pond. You have put something in the pond and it grows bad. Okay, there are all kinds of weird things grow in ponds. This is a flow. This is like living water. Okay, this is flowing between people, between you and nature itself. And that is the primary solution that I see to ego. Next up is going to be Joe, Dave, Evanik, and Katie. Joe.
So it's a wonderful presentation, and I have so many thoughts that are actually kind of going through my mind at the moment. It's hard to categorize them, but I will say that, so the ultimate goal here is how to live in harmony with each other. That's the way I'm viewing this, is that how do we live in harmony with nature and how do we live in harmony with the world? But one of the questions that I have is the fundamental differences that I have been unable to really reconcile. And you kind of captured it on slide 5 and 1 in a way, is how the Bible looks at the world and how the Gita and maybe the Tao look at the world. And one is saying that it's being done through the word, while the other two seem to be more of internal experience versus external. And I have a problem reconciling those two when I'm thinking about the commonalities between the three.
Excellent. Thank you. Great question. So the question is of harmony. So firstly, I think all these three talk about harmony, not just between people, but between the core of you and God. And they see harmony between people as an aspect of that. This is true for actually all three of them. Like if you make your peace with God, if you act in accordance with the Tao, if you do your karma, if you act according to the laws of nature, you're automatically acting in harmony with it. So for example, if a person like Lao Tzu is very explicit about it, that just do that and your interactions with people are going to be very good. So that's one point I wanted to make, that they all are really based on your relationship to the ultimate as a way of managing the relationship. Jesus says that the way I loved the Father and the Father loves me. I'm going to show you how to do that. And you're using that model to deal with each other. So that's one. So that was the first point about harmony. The second point is that it's absolutely true that the West is very much explicit. It is very much yang. It is very much focused on the blue as a way of achieving it. Whereas something like Taoism is very much, they are very skeptical about the use of blue. And he's very much focused on the use of the red. Now, both, and it's also the point about external and internal is also very deep. Internal means focused on the nature of the spirit. External means focused on the nature of the world. The blue is actually very, very good at focusing on the nature of the world. So if you want to say the West is blue and green, and Taoism is yellow and red, okay, they have elements of the other for sure, but it's a question of emphasis, right? So in the terms of Carl Jung, this one is thinking, T, and this is sensing, S. So it is the Western culture is TS dominated, or the Eastern culture, not Eastern culture. Eastern culture is very vast, but Taoism is very much of a N, which is the intuition of the spirit, and F, the feeling of it. So it is NF interacting with TS. The beauty of all of these diagrams is that they capture both of these things together. Now, if you look at the Gita, Gita is largely the male principle. So is the Bible. The female is less. So that is why, for example, when we looked at Savitri, I think Savitri is a very profound addition, what Sri Aurobindo has done, because what he does is that he treats, there is a yoga of Ashwapati, which is this yoga of taking the energy of the physical world and appealing to the spirit. And then there is the yoga of Savitri, which is very much of the female principle of saying who possesses the greatest of spirits, and she's trying to transform the world and conquer death using love. So both these, and the integration of the East and West has that potential of bringing these two things together. So thank you, Joe. Next up is going to be Dave, Evanique, Katie, and Jyoti. Dave.
Thanks very much, Shrikant. What I want to talk about is the green circle.
Which slide would you like to see first?
Well,
is this good?
What you have right there is fine, because I want to talk about the interface between two people. But I'm the green circle, and I think in my comments we talked about a few nights ago, I was talking about Jesus and Satan both being inside myself. But the green circle, you have the star, and I'd almost say it's good and evil. But so many times we don't see the good inside ourselves. And when I see all the other stars, the other person, I see that they are basically good with maybe only small problems inside. So we end up with fear, because all I can see is my own problems. All I can see is the sin, and I feel inferior, and I am afraid. And before I've talked about a mask. So if my friend asks me, well, how are you today, Dave? I'm afraid. And I will always say, well, I'm okay.
Thank you.
I'm afraid to say, I'm hurting. I need your help.
Thank you, Dave. Let me go ahead and respond to that. Folks, keep comments short so we can get through we can cover as much ground. Dave, you brought up fantastic points. Both the point about where is Satan in this diagram, and what is the difference between the motivation by fear versus motivation by love. So Satan is simply, you're focused on this world and you're going away from the center. You are going away from this. You're focused on things which are right here, and it is taking you away from this. You're drifting, you're basically just drifting in this region all over the place. That's what Satan is. We did this entire book on outwitting the devil, and that's what it is. This is drifting. You're just reacting to things. That is what is going on now. There is so the difference between so what Jesus is doing is that he's saying, stop doing that. Like what he's saying is, sacrifice the lower to the higher. Sacrifice your attachment here and keep only the things that are going directly into this. That's what his solution is, which is exactly opposite than what Satan is doing. Now, the point I want to make about fear, he makes a very beautiful point. He's saying that what you really want is the love of the Father. So basically this star, suppose you're standing here, your love for God shaping things as if you were his son. This is a love of son driving life. That is love-oriented motivation. There is a second kind of motivation where the older laws are telling you what you need to do in the physical world, and you're afraid, you're full of fear to go against those laws, so you're obeying them. And he says that is motivation of a slave towards a master. So when you're obeying laws out of fear of the master, that is one kind of action. The other kind, which is motivated by fear, what he is advocating in the New Testament is an action which is based on love. So that's that is the difference. So that's my point about that's how I would respond to it. Folks, these are enormously deep topics. So I'm going to try to respond to as much as I can. We'll have multiple ways of going, multiple times you can come back on this. When you ask questions, if there is a particular slide you want me to bring up, you can go ahead and ask for this slide. Otherwise, you can talk in general, okay? And try to be brief. And I'm going to try to listen very closely, and I'm going to try to respond in the deepest way I possibly can. Evanik, Katie, Jyoti, and Joe. Evanik.
Yeah, so slide 8, I wanted to talk about, we were talking to Shana Marie. I was thinking of attachment and the 3 texts, and the ego is doing it for work and for outside outside approval, like approval from outside of yourself. But when you're working for God or working for spirit, you're working, and it talks about it in all 3 texts, you're working just in service of God. So I guess the idea is, and please help me with this, is that you are in service to God instead of being in service to material things. So it's kind of like, what do you choose to be attached to?
Right. So this point about attachment is fundamental. So for example, in Gita, that's a huge focus. It is all about, it says attachment is fundamentally wrong. Because attachment is basically, you can see my mouse, right? So attachment is, there is something here that you have created that you're attached to. You're holding on to that for dear life, okay? We are creatures of habit. We are creatures of saying, let's be comfortable. So attachment is actually a very natural part of our evolutionary heritage. So we hold on to that. What all these religions are saying is that focus on the deepest truth in nature, in your own soul, and act according to that. Be prepared to give up everything, anything that stands in the way. When Jesus talks about sacrifice, that's exactly what he's talking about. Give up the things that you're used to so that you can do the right thing. The concept of yajna or sacrifice that Bhagavad Gita talks about is exactly the same thing. Lao Tzu is saying these are 10,000 things, and these are 10,000 things based on names which don't fully capture the core. So don't be focused on those things. Focus on the Tao instead and act according to that, and everything will be good. Okay. So it is all about it. And even when, and this is a very important point, even when you have done something in the past which was good, if you remain attached to that, when the context has changed, that is still harmful. So that's I think the theme of attachment is very large. So folks, what I'm going to do is that I'm going to give a chance to people who have not asked the questions first, and then I'm going to go to people who have asked the questions before, because I want to get as many voices in this conversation as we possibly can. And don't worry, I'll answer all the questions that you have. I'm not going anywhere. I have plenty of time. We will go ahead and I will answer all the questions as I possibly can. Katie, Jyoti, Brian, and then Shane Murray and Joe. Katie.
I have 2 points. And my first point is that it's been interesting to explore how much dualistic thinking there is, like good and evil, and like, because people don't have talked less about gray. It's more like black and white, like good and evil. And then like sometimes I think people do gray to avoid doing black. And my second point would be the ego comment. I thought the Maritza's book, The Flow State, where you're sitting down to your computer and it's 9 o'clock, and then you look up at your clock and you see it's 5 o'clock, like that feeling of being connected and then losing sense of the time. I feel like the flow of water and kind of feeling connected to something greater, versus like the ego is a little bit more like self-obsessed and worried about.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, Katie. I'll comment on the flow point. Basically, what happens is that when you have, when you are, the person of all these 3 people who speak most about the flow state is Lao Tzu. And there it's the most explicit and persistent theme, that when you're acting in accordance with the Tao, when you are acting in accordance with the core principle of nature, as well as the core principle, so this is the core principle of nature, let's say, this is the core principle of you, and core principle of the people that you're dealing with, the things that you're dealing with. When it is according to the spirit, then there is a flow state. There is, it just flows. They call it Wu Wei. It's action with no action, because you're not trying to push it against something. You're going in the direction in which things naturally flow. The other point about gray, I will deal with little later on. Next up is going to be Jyoti, Brian, Shane Murray, and Joe. Jyoti.
Okay, my question is 2-pronged, and I'm going to make it as short as I can. So just bear with me. Okay. It's possible sometimes for a long span of time The continuous process is interrupted. There is no receiving and giving at the same time going on. You are giving to the nature, you are in sync with nature, and you are receiving it from the nature. And call it a karma yoga or a bhakti yoga, but you are immersed in that. However, a stage comes when you want to not reverse it, not reverse the process, but you do want to receive from the world. But you are not in sync with the world because you have a different value system and you have been groomed differently. And how do you then, well, you do, it's not, the question is not how. You do it because you have the need now to fit in and make some compromises. But is it, then it is not possible for the blue and green to be in sync with each other. And there is some degree of frustration. You have to give up something in order to be happy with yourself. And that's where this conflict comes in. This is my take, this is my observation.
Thank you. Okay, that's fantastic observation. Let's talk about this. This is very deep question. So there is a lot going on here, right? I mean, there is basically, there are things between you and God, like between the core of you and the core of nature. And in addition to that, there is culture. There is a culture here which points in multiple directions. In some ways, it will capture this depth that you're talking about. In some ways, you yourself may be away from this. It's like what happens is that it's not automatic that you are following the Tao or doing the work of God. You're doing something. It is not automatic that all the other people are doing the same thing. So another way of looking at it is that you can just look at it in terms of center. Maybe this will help, right? So I don't know what's the best thing to do. I think let's look at it this way. So what happens is that most things are at different distances from the center. Some of them are different, like one point can be here and one point can be here. Both are equally away from the center, but they are culture, one culture focuses it this way, one culture focuses it on that way. So there are kind of cultural differences between focuses, which are not necessarily have to do anything with the spirit. They can be equally bad, for example, equally away from the center. One way I have found, like, for example, Bible deals with this issue very directly. He's saying, there are Gentiles and there are Jews. Jews are the people of the book. They have taken in everything of the book, and these Gentiles don't have anything. They don't have any base. So the question is, can you go to a level to talk to anybody? All these religions, their aspiration is to do that. Now, while doing that, there are many times you will produce things which are actually in direction with this, but many other people don't see it, because there is going to be a tremendous variation. So all of this that we're talking about is the green part over here. So there is a lot, there is green over here and there is green over here. There is no familiarity. There may be, for example, there may be green very close to the center, to the core principle, which uses a lot of it. But there is another one over here, which has actual differences where people can't actually see across the differences to see that there is a commonality between them. So there is a lot to be said about kind of differences, lack of communication, attachment to ways of doing things, and you have to overcome many of them in order to achieve like this kind of a relationship. It's the similar point that that Shane Murray was talking about, that it is difficult to achieve this all the time. It is very difficult because it means that people have to be willing to set aside their ego, set aside their habits, to actually listen to the other person. In some cases, either you or them may be actually wrong. You have to also, account for that. So it is, that's the best answer I can give at this point. Next up is going to be, and folks, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to give the best answer I can. You're welcome to bring it up, the same topic. If it was not answered properly, you can go ahead and bring it up again later on, okay? Because we'll continue talking about all these themes. Let's start. Next up is Brian. Brian, go ahead.
Okay, this is Penny.
Penny, go ahead.
Okay. I just had a question. I think it was on 5 where you only had one of the circles and you went over Christianity, Tao, and Hinduism.
Yep.
Or even, well, that's fine. Or the one before it. I got a little confused, like the star, let's say, is God or Krishna. No, not
this
yeah.
one. Okay.
Yeah. And then the green is, well, I think you said if in Christianity, the star was
Shall I go ahead and run through? Do you want me to run through Christianity or Bhagavad Gita?
Could you run through Christianity for me?
Sure. So the star here is God.
Yeah.
God loves the world. This is the world. The green is the world. He loves the world. There is a love of the world in his heart. Okay. He creates this world and he's the efficient cause of the world. He's shaping all of the world. Okay. What he does is that through his grace, this is the grace, he sends his son down to the earth. Okay. So here is Jesus standing here on earth. What does he do? He is saying to the world is sacrifice your sins, give up your sins, give up things that are not going towards the spirit. I will show you the way to the spirit, to God. And what he does is that he shows the way, and that creates in hearts of people Holy Spirit, which is basically love for God and love for each other. So that is my summary here.
Okay. And so the red is basically a flow from God to mankind?
To mankind. Now, the thing is that in Bible, that is not very strong. That is not very emphasized. What is emphasized is this part of Jesus saying to the world, give these things up which are not of God, so that we can go here. Bible is mostly like this. It is the word. This is the word. So Bible is mostly blue.
Mm-hmm.
It is a way of, it is basically the word that takes green to yellow, takes the world to God. Okay, so that's the direction. But what I'm saying is that there is, like, for example, God's grace, right, is coming like this. It is the Spirit's giving something to the world and transforming the world that way. There are, for example, like Taoism focuses a lot on this red. It is saying that act according to Tao so that the world, you're doing this Wu Wei, actions in accordance to the nature of things so that the world is better. It is all about this. It is actually very skeptical about words. It's saying, I can't even name this thing to you. Just get it directly through intuition. and then come like this. Okay.
Okay.
Thank you, Penny.
Okay.
Next up is going to be Shane Murray, Joe, and Evanique. Shane Murray.
Yes, so I apologize. This is something I struggle with routinely, is this notion of word to God, like the connection to God. So whatever avenue you take, I don't find that there's this clear, distinct path to God that whatever religion espouses, it's not this obvious, clear path. If you just do X, then you get God. Like it feels so much more frustrating than that there's not just, I don't care what religion you pursue, there's not just an obvious do A, B, and C, and you get D, which is God. And so how do we navigate that uncertainty that exists that surrounds this whole notion of God? That is like, there is no just A, B, and C, and you get D. Like, it's not that way. So how do we navigate these uncertainties and be steadfast and pursue it nonetheless? Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you. Great question. Great question. And this is a question, it's very much of a modern question. This is a question, when you actually commune with these books, the Bible, Tao Te Ching, and Bhagavad Gita, which were written long before the print revolution, okay? They don't have this problem. This is very much of a modern problem, because the modern mind expects it to be A, B, you do A, B, and C, and then D comes, okay? So this is a way of actually taking what we have done magnificently in physical sciences and expecting that the human beings will operate exactly the same way. What the approach that I find that is common to all these four religions is best captured by Aristotle and his concept of four causes. So to put it in terms of causes, the modern world focuses only on the material cause and the efficient cause as seen only in the material cause, in the immediate next. So the billiard ball that hits the billiard ball, that cause is all that modern religion, modern thinking focuses on. So I want to talk about these four causes, because this goes to the heart of how all these three religions are approaching it. And this is what the thinking was like in the scribal age, when there was this back and forth between writing and talking. What this is saying is that there are actually four causes. There is the material cause, which is the material world. There is a formal cause where you're trying to organize the material world in order to create a vision that makes sense. There is a final cause, which is saying, okay, why are we doing this? Why do people do things? Just trying to answer that question. Okay, so there is, and then there is efficient cause, the thing that is actually moving things. In terms, using the terms of Carl Jung, most of the modern science is TS. It is thinking about sensory data, and it is trying to do things with it. There are two other faculties at work here. One is intuition, which is like use of the right brain. So this is very much is a left brain operation, seeing things and thinking about them and organizing them. These two are very much of a right brain operation. The intuition is all about trying to pull together subconsciously, wordlessly, or visually everything that you know to see a pattern in that. So it's all about pattern, identifying patterns. And the idea of the yellow is very much about intuition, is about relentlessly training your intuition. And then there is the part of love, emotion, motivated action. That is a crucial part. It is not about just taking the input and making sense of it, but so it is, consider, for example, the OODA loop, which is a modern version, but it does capture these four things. You're observing things, you're orienting, then you're deciding. See, decision is something that comes from you within. It's your spirit saying, yes, this is the meaning of this situation, and I will go for it. And then actual action. So that provides this play of these four faculties. This operation of these four causes is what is behind the operation of all these religions. So the only way to do this, to appreciate the religions, is to understand. And the easiest thing to do is to start by reading Aristotle's four causes. And Aquinas is what I would recommend in order to do that. Next up is going to be Joe, followed by Evanique. Joe.
Yeah, so my first point was going to be something about written versus oral culture, but you kind of just covered that. But my next question would be, how do these three religions, and I've thought about this a little bit, is the idea of judgment and how that we look at judging others. And they all seem to refrain from the idea of acquiescing to our opinions of others or things. So for Christianity, it seems like don't judge. It is like that you don't judge others, that you look at yourself as a sinner. And there's this idea of the spirit of seeing everyone else. But how does essentially the Gita and or the Tao and the Gita think about judgment within that context?
Wonderful. Excellent question. So if you look at, I don't see the Bible. I think judgment is crucial to the Bible, because it's all about, there is going to be a judgment that, it's the son who is judging, not the father. Father just created this world, but the son is judging. Judging is simply saying, is this going towards the yellow or not? Are you going towards the yellow or not? And what happens is that the point that Jesus makes about let the one without sin cast the first stone is saying that it's two things. One which separates the Old Testament and New Testament. It is saying that everyone can be in multiple places. Everyone is a sinner in the sense that you are away from the spirit in various ways. Don't focus on, firstly, other people being away. Focus on yourself first. Okay, so that's one thing. That is Jordan Peterson's idea of fix your life first before trying to fix anybody else. Okay. The second point is that of the power of will, of saying that we have the capacity of saying no to what we have done in the past and to start over. So the form in which Jesus puts it is that if you believe in me and believe in the Father, then the sins are, forgiven. That's how I see on Jesus. Now, in terms of the judgment in Gita, very much there is judgment. Krishna says that when the world goes away from this core, I come. in order to destroy things that are doing that, and to save people who are following me. So it's all about saying, do your karma. Don't be focused on, there are 3 kinds of gunas. So focus on truth, which is here. Don't focus on immediate emotional reactions, which is going sideways. And don't give up everything either. So it's all, it's so the judgment is there in Gita. In Lao Tzu, how does Lao Tzu look at judgment? He is actually he's very gentle about it, but he's definitely judging. He's saying, look, either you're following the Tao, you're not following the Tao. Most people are not following the Tao. And the sage follows the Tao. Most people are making mistakes and they're going away from it. But the way to actually fix it is to fix it gently, through example, through showing. So it is the same kind of thing. So both Jesus and Lao Tzu are judging that this is the way to Tao, this is the way to God, and that is not. So they're in their mind, they're very clear. At the same time, the way to get other people to go in that direction is not by pushing them to doing that, but by being an example, by showing them, inspiring them to follow. So to create that heart, to instill the Holy Spirit or love of God or love of each other in them, or for them to appreciate the Tao by you appreciating the Tao in them as they are. So that's how I see it's a dual thing. It's making a judgment, but realizing that the best you can do for another person is to motivate them to do this on their own. And that's what they focus on. Next up is going to be, let's see, Evanik.
Yeah, so I have 2 quick questions. The first one is going back a little bit to the yoga or the yogi, and I'm still lost on the concept of the yogas. So I was just wondering if you could expand. But
Sure.
Number 2,
Sure.
The Aristotle part where you said you recommend.
Let's go one by one. So I'll answer this one, and then you can ask that one.
Okay.
Okay. So the yogas are actually, this is very interesting because it actually talks about these 4 causes. These are 4 areas. Okay, this is something that I've thought about for a long time. And yogas are actually directly about these 4 things. Okay, so this one, blue over here, is thinking. So that is called Jnana Yoga. That means the knowledge of yoga. That means the yoga of knowledge. That means you try your best to understand what is going on. And that's a path. Okay, and what it holds, what Indian philosophy holds, is that there are these 4 paths. And all of them will get you there. There are some that are going to be easier for you to do than the others, and you should do whichever ones you can. They are all together. So to the extent to which you have to respect all 4, and you kind of, if you actually do one of them really well, you end up doing the other 3 as well. Okay, so this one is one that focuses on thinking and understanding. That's called jnana. Jnana means knowledge. Okay, so yoga of knowledge. So that's number 1. The red over here is the yoga of bhakti. That is one of devotion, of love. So you actually love God and you do everything from that. So that is the red. It's basically focuses on your emotion. Okay. Then there is the karma yoga, which is about work, doing the right work as per the principles. So you may not understand what is going on. You may not have as much bhakti, but you're doing karma. Now, what happens is that moment you start doing more and more of it, you will get more knowledge. You will have more devotion. Okay. But so it is a focus. It's a question of focus. That is a focus on work. And the fourth one is this called Raja Yoga, which is about training your attention to be focused on the spirit or God all the time and not be distracted by other things. So keeping the focus continuously on God. So that's called Raja Yoga. Does that answer the questions about yoga?
Yes.
Okay. On to the next question. Go ahead.
Just quickly, you were saying you would recommend for the four causes to read Aristotle. Would you recommend the book, or you were saying Thomas Aquinas as well?
I don't know. I mean, on four causes, I think Thomas Aquinas is the best one. I have understood the four causes better through Aquinas than through Aristotle himself. So let me talk about the four causes as he talks about. I think this was chapter 3, his commentary on chapter 3. So God so loved the world. So God is the efficient cause. Okay, so efficient means the thing that is creating everything. So God is the efficient cause. World is the material cause. Okay, now the knowledge word, okay, the word is actually providing a path for the world, for people in the world to get to God. So it is showing you how, it is explaining you, it is knowledge that is called the formal cause. So what is Jesus? Jesus is basically the formal cause. The final cause is yours wanting something. So that is the Holy Spirit. Holy Spirit is basically you in your heart wanting to be good, wanting truth. So that is the final cause. So that's an application of those ideas to, this is Aquinas' application of those ideas to the core theme of the New Testament. Okay, but I don't know what the good reference is, but that's a great question, and I have to find something, because I do want to focus more on these four causes eventually. Thank you, Evanik. Folks, go ahead and type exclamation mark if you have questions. Next up is Shane Murray. Shane Murray.
I apologize if you attempted to answer this, but so you just spoke of the formal cause to get to God, and then the final cause of individuals wanting God. And I feel like I very much desire a relationship with God, but there's a distance there that I have yet to figure out how to span. So I'm deeply, deeply, deeply curious about what is within me. What am I not understanding to bridge that distance? So
I have some suggestions. So let me give you suggestions here. So number one, this goes to what Joe was asking. See, there are these, what the Center for the Study of Digital Life calls different psycho-technological ages. Scribal age is where all of these works have been written. And really, that way of functioning is something that you have to get in order to understand this. So for example, I'm not religious. So I'm saying all of these things. I'm not religious. But I see these ideas as capturing something fundamental about nature of human beings. I don't see how you can understand things. This is kind of part of the human tradition of understanding human beings. And I see it as being completely consistent with my understanding of human beings without religion. So it is not about religion. It's a way of thinking, the scribal way of thinking, which is very foreign to modern Westerners. That is why most people do not, so most of these works don't have the same power as it did. So what is it that is different? The difference is this going back and forth between the writing and speaking. So what I recommend is to firstly forget about all commentaries, just go and read these in original. You can also listen to them. What we're doing is that we're doing these 3 parallel meetups, one on Gospel of John, one on Tao Te Ching, and one on Bhagavad Gita. So we're trying to commune with the text itself. So that itself, if you're actually open to hearing what it is saying, instead of using your typical way of thinking about it, what I'm saying is that it's a different way of thinking. And you have to get that way of thinking. And it involves using the 4 causes. It uses all the human faculties. What happens is that the print is analytical. It is, just look at it in terms of a book. Book is written like this. Your mind goes like this, like this, like this. The scribal world is not like that at all. And the world is not like that at all. So what it does is that it's this motion that is tried to be replicated in the mind. And people are losing out a lot in the process of doing that. And what the scribal does is that it brings back the earlier ways. So for example, consider what we are doing here. You see, this is a diagram. This is not parallel. Everything that I want to say is right there in one stroke. That is very much anti-print. It is visual. It appeals to your right brain, not just your left brain. So one is the issue of left brain versus right brain. You have to engage your right brain. The second is the issue of action. We need ideas to guide our lives. That feedback loop. So the science, printing, reading is all about this. You're doing this, you're doing this, you're perfecting this. But actually saying what is most meaningful in life, that is what the yellow is. And acting based on that is crucial to human life. Religions have always gotten that, always gotten that. Print kind of has lost that. And the modern world has lost that. So that is what you have to recover. It's at a cultural level and at an individual level. We're doing that in our meetups. So that's what I would say. Folks, anybody else has any questions, any comments? So now I can shift to comments. Go ahead, let me see. All right, so Rupali has something. Rupali says, I'm in a public area and cannot unmute. Here are my thoughts and questions. Aurobindo says, life is love. And Louis Sullivan says that the highest power of man is love, meant as compassion for life, for humanity and for nature. Very good. In all 3 texts, there is a focus on love, also called devotion. When the Tao resides in us, when we recognize that God is with us, then we have the confidence to take action. Absolutely. That's beautifully put, Rupali. Fully agree. So what, if you want to see this, so for example, this star is God, okay? And when you have the love of God. Actually, love is making all of these things go around. Okay. So let's just talk about love in the Bible context, because it is very explicit there. Okay. God so loved the world. Okay. It starts with God so loved the world. Okay. So, okay, Rupali, I'll come to your question in a second. I'm going to just comment on what you've said first. So God so loved the world. So there is a love between the star, yellow star, and the world. Okay, that he sent his only son. Okay, so that's a tremendous act of grace. Okay, and what is he going to do? So that he's going to help give eternal life. Eternal life is simply residing here. It's like eternity now that you can have. So if it's, what is the function? So okay, so sorry, I want to come back to the theme of love. So when Jesus comes down here, right? So one of the things, he says, I give you the new commandment, that you love one another. And what does that mean? If you read around, unfortunately, I'm not yet good at quoting places where things are, so I have to put it in my own words. So what he's saying is that the love between the Father and the Son, and the important thing to realize is that it is a reciprocal love. The Father loves the Son and the Son loves the Father. Okay. And all that God is trying to do is that God loves the world and he wants the world to love God. Okay. What does Jesus do? When he knows it's time for him to leave, this is, I think, John 13, he starts to wash his disciples' feet. And Peter says, why are you washing my feet? And he says, I want to show you that by my loving you, I want to show you how you need to love each other. So it's kind of transmission of the love between the Father and Son. He's trying to transmit that between the disciples, and then through disciples to the church, church is simply the community of people who love one another like the Father loves the Son and Son loves the Father. So that's how love plays out. Now, here is my question. The idea of God is man-made. So all these texts, if we have created these ideas, then don't all these qualities reside in us? Absolutely. Because it is really our intuition of what is the most important thing in the world. What is true? What is good? What is beautiful? The concentrated version of that is what we're talking about when we're talking about God. So folks, I'm going to give a chance for people who have not asked the questions to ask first. So it's going to be JP, Kevin, Evanik, and Jyoti. JP.
Okay, thank you, Shrikant. Great presentation. I'll try to be concise, maybe too concise in this question, but you mentioned all these different paths from achieving salvation in Christianity, living in accordance with Wu Wei, and you could even add maybe Buddhism, achieving enlightenment. So the question is basically, there's these systems that are set up and paths we need to go on. Yet the ultimate goal is, it seems, disproportionately difficult to achieve. So my maybe poor analogy would be something, there's like a university course, and only say 0.0001% of people are successful in it. So the question is, why is it so difficult to achieve salvation in Christianity, follow perfectly Wu Wei, in Buddhism, achieve enlightenment? So it just seems there's this discrepancy between the system that's set up that's extremely difficult to follow, and just maybe the shortcomings of humans in achieving that. So maybe you can answer that. Thanks.
Excellent question, JP. So what I would say is the core thing is right here. Okay, so we're living on the earth, and there are many things that we have, which we are attached to. Our kind of animal nature is that we are creatures of habit. We like comfort, and all of this is about just here. It is not about this. Napoleon Hill has this great book, Outwitting the Devil, and he says the core difference is between drifting and having a definite purpose. Having a definite purpose of saying that I will do the right thing. I will do things which are true. I will do things which are good, is hard because it is like going uphill. Drifting is easy because it is going downhill. So that is why it is all these paths are difficult. But in another sense, all of these systems hold that it is, on one hand, it is paradoxical. On one hand, it is extremely difficult because you have to go against our natural instincts. On the other hand, it is an act of will. You can focus. So, like, each of these religions say it differently. In Raja Yoga, it is all about developing, keep your attention on this, on God. If you can do that, that's all you need. In Christianity, it is saying faith in Jesus. So, and commit yourself to that. That's it. That's all that is needed. And then all your sins are forgiven, and you're just doing that. So on one hand, it is extremely hard because we are creatures of habit. On the other hand, it is an act of will. Act of will is an act of effort. And it is not one-time effort. It is continual exercise of effort towards this. You have to pay attention. The fact that you're paying attention now does not mean that you will pay attention a fraction of a second from that. You have to keep the attention, which requires effort. But that ability to pay attention is something that you have. Your capacity to will, capacity to choose the right thing is there within us all the time. So in that sense, it is extremely hard and extremely easy at the same time. Next up is going to be Kevin, Evanik, and Jyoti. Kevin.
Thank you, Sanka. I got a quick question. What is the name for your diagram or logo here?
I have no name. I don't have a name, Kevin, because Lao Tzu says all the names, there is a problem with names. I don't have a name, sorry.
But I don't want to challenge you, but you mentioned the truth, purpose, they already named. So anyway, that's that'll be next question. But my question here, what's the difference apply and induce period here?
Yes, so induce is a very good question, Kevin. So induce is going up. It is starting with facts, many facts, and organizing them systematically, correcting your errors, making hypotheses. Maybe this is how they are put together, testing the hypothesis, and coming up with something which is one, which is the conclusion based on all the observations. So it's going from many in the sensory realm in order to come up with one in the conceptual realm. Applying means that taking that one and then applying it and making something which is real based on that idea, moving from a concept to percepts. So this is moving from percepts to concepts. This is from concepts to percepts. Thank you. Next up is going to be Evanik, followed by Jyoti. Evanik.
Yeah, I just observed something, and I don't know if it means anything, but in this diagram, like you notice how in the star that is God, there's the center that is us or Earth, right? Or the world. And I always, and then in the center of the world, there's the piece that is God. I was thinking, and this may be way off, but I was thinking that God is taking a piece of himself and putting it in the world, in us, right? And then he's taking a piece of us and putting it in himself so that we're always connected. Is that way off base?
I mean, that's a way of thinking about it. I mean, the way I think about it is that, I mean, the reason I put it this way is that I'm saying that you can never really understand God without the word. You cannot understand a function without the form. And you cannot really understand the form without the function. So you have always to think of it together. So that's so what the function has within it is the seed of the word. It's like the seed, the thing that is going to become the world. And what this one has, the world has in it is like the living force that is going to shape it. So that's, I don't know whether it answers the question well, but that's how I think about it.
Yeah, I did. Thank you.
Thanks. Next up is going to be David, followed by Jyoti. Oh, sorry, Jyoti, go ahead. You're unmuted. Go ahead.
Okay. You said something that made me think about a few things that my deceased husband used to say too. You had said that when you are doing bhakti yoga and you have been trained and you are in conflict with the world and you are in sync with the nature, with your Gita and what have you, you mentioned that you could be wrong too. That means I could be wrong.
Yeah.
Okay, so if I can be wrong, then my principles of life that I had derived from Gita are wrong. And I am not able to give that to the world that I'm living in because I am not quite right. Am I making sense?
So no, what I'm saying is that you have to always hold out the possibility that you can be wrong, because all of us have a possibility of making mistakes, and you can't. So what I'm saying is that there is a tendency that many people have of having a confirmation bias. They'll say, okay, look, I'm doing everything right. It's just the world's fault that the world doesn't like what I'm doing. Okay, that is what I'm talking against. I'm saying that don't have confirmation bias. Go ahead.
Okay, what I didn't think, now I'm a different person, but I did not think when I was doing that I had a confirmation bias.
Okay, so
but what I was saying,
yeah.
But what I was thinking was, I've been trained by those principles and I have to live by them. I'm not going to change anybody. But that's why I was not in sync with the world, even though I'm not going to change the world. But I'm going to use those principles.
Sure. So Jyoti, I mean, the thing is that I don't know about you in particular, right? So, but the general thing I would say is that the way I'm seeing, just for myself and for, I think it's a reasonable thing, is to be open about what you're thinking and to be open to kind of figuring out. I mean, I've certainly been wrong in a very deep way in my life and what to be open to that, of saying, not because there is a tendency that many people have of simply saying, because I think this way, that is it. And you see only the things that support it, and you basically damn everything else. If you're finding that you're running against the wall again and again and again and again, there are two possibilities. that you're doing something wrong, or there is something that is wrong, or both of you are wrong, or maybe both of you are right in different ways, and you have to be open to all those possibilities. That's all I'm saying. In individual cases, it will be very different. Next up is going to be David, followed by Joe. David.
Yes, I should comment. I wanted to expand or point something related to Evanik's comment that you and most of the Hindu ancestry people are bringing a specific mentality to this, specifically from the Sanskrit language, if I understand correctly, where every word is a verb and everything nouns can be formed from verbs. When you talk about form and function, I think, at least to me, that sort of evokes a very sense of the way that the words in Sanskrit work versus the way the words work in English or something else. That may be something about why there's a disconnect or a communication of how you're viewing this, and how the word and form follows function, and Jesus, the word that you're presenting it in a very verb noun way that may be sort of intrinsic to the language that you were coming from.
That's interesting. I mean, I'm not sure. I certainly am thinking of it. See, the person who is a master at this is, of course, Louis Sullivan, and he definitely thinks of it as verbs, as being the actions that are forming things, and forms are like the coagulation of those actions. And then the actions continue to have that nature. Sometimes the coagulated forms actually start to impede the natural actions. So forms go against the functions, in which case they need to be thrown away and redone again. So it is definitely kind of verb-centric thinking. And I think absolutely, that's certainly true. But your observation about it being rooted in Sanskrit, I don't know for sure, but I will definitely look at that. Thanks, David. Next up is Joe.
Yeah, just to follow up briefly about this idea of a fixed versus growth mindset, essentially what Jody was talking about. It's kind of this idea of being like water, right? Essentially, you're allowing things, you're adaptable to the situation. This is really hammered home in both Lao Tzu and the other two works as well, is that the example of the pond that you had given, the pond is still, it's fixed. It's not necessarily moving. Whereas if you're open and water is able to flow, that essentially you're able to integrate new information and adapt. And this is really an important concept because the idea that these things can be adapted to, you can adapt your principles to achieve the desired outcome. And I feel like all three of these religions have a desired outcome. And that's where I was going in the beginning with the idea of harmony.
Mm-hmm.
So that this idea of being flexible within that framework is really kind of important. And I forget the example that I wanted to use for the Bible, but I had examples from the Bible and Gita where the idea of being able to flow is very, very important.
No, absolutely. A great point. I mean, and that is really the heart. I mean, this point about being fluent is huge. I mean, Lao Tzu actually does the best job of capturing that. And the Chinese thought of kind of yin yang, I think is just brilliant way of capturing that. But that is there throughout. Folks, I definitely recommend Louis Sullivan on all of this, because he is, he has done the best job that I have seen about talking about all of the stuff that I've been talking about. And a lot of what I'm saying is based on his work. And we've done 30 meetups covering two of his core books, Autobiography of an Idea and Kindergarten Chats. And I've gotten really heavy guns. I've got, Rupali Sharma and Sherry Trasinski, who are architects, talking about this. I've got Maritza, Choya, and Rob Trasinski talking about it. So it's really an amazing series. And I recommend it very highly because, kind of coming back to the first one, I called it form and function. And even the flowing part between the two, Sullivan gets it better than anybody else. And he's more explicit than Lao Tzu about that and exactly how the flow happens. So there is a lot that you can get from Sullivan. So go to 52 Living Ideas YouTube channel and search for the Sullivan playlist. And you can read, I recommend just reading Kindergarten Chats to start with. And as you're reading chapter by chapter, watch the meetups that we've done. We've got these 5 incredible presentations on each of the chapters. So that's the best way to actually grapple with this, because he puts it in a modern language. It's still about 100-year-old language, but it's still far more accessible than any of the 3 works, actually. And he's very much of a spiritual person at the deepest level. And he's an architect who's the father of the skyscraper who has transformed the world. So he actually embodies this entire thing that we're talking about better than anybody else. So I recommend, Louis Sullivan. If you want to read one thing to follow up on these ideas next year in 2022, I would recommend Louis Sullivan. It's very interesting, though the number of people who have attended this, the Louis Sullivan meetups is small. The percentage of people who think that Louis Sullivan has been the most influential meetups is very high. So I recommend that. Next up is going to be Joe. Joe.
Yeah, just really quickly to reiterate the idea that life was beginning to break in upon him.
Yes.
Absolutely. From the outside.
Absolutely.
And then, a continuous breaking in from the outside,
right.
Breaking out from the inside.
Yeah.
That's the whole kind of concept. But one of the really quick things I wanted to
let me build up on that, Joe.
Okay.
And then, folks, I'm going to ask people for what they got from this meetup. Okay. That's going to be the last question, and then we'll call it a day. So this thing, I think Joe brought this up. I was planning to talk about it. I forgot, and Joe brought it up. In his autobiography, Louis Sullivan says, life began to break in upon him from the outside. And a continuous breaking in from the outside and breaking out from the inside was to shape his destiny. That's actually the whole story. So you're taking in everything from the world. And then you are expressing it. So that it's basically going from the world to your spirit, and from spirit to the world. And you are transforming yourself in the process, and you are transforming the world in the process. All of us are doing that. And what we see is basically, this happening, throughout the world. So that's the summary. Now I'm happy to just ask you how this meetup was. Just let me know what you thought. So go ahead and type ! if you'd like to share any thoughts about this meetup. Evanik, followed by Dave. Evanik.
I thought it was excellent. Thank you. I think what I really got was the understanding of the 4 yogas and the connection and the ideas that all 3 texts brings to the conversation in general and how they relate. I was able to really, because I knew this meetup was coming up, to go through the Gita and the Bible and the Tao, like listening to it. And you and the diagrams that you presented brought all those three ideas together greatly. I thought the questions were excellent and the way you answer them were really good. And it just brought a deeper understanding, both broad and with each text. So it worked.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, Evanik. Next up is going to be Dave, Joe, and Shane Murray. Dave.
Yeah, thanks, Shrikant. I think a very interesting study in the commonality between the religions. But my observation, speaking as a recovering Christian, is that religion is not the answer. It's something we try. We keep trying different religions. But I think you're bringing out the main point that it's us, it's the individuals, it's the world that we need to find a problem, and not the answer is not killing each other. The answer is trying to communicate with each other and to love each other. Thanks for another good session.
Thank you, Dave. Next up is Joe, Shane Murray, and Kevin. Joe.
So when I look at and think about these three works, there are a lot more commonalities that we could have touched upon. And I think that it was fantastic to have this discussion, primarily because I think that they're all seeking to solve the same problem, is that, it's the search for wisdom, how to act wisely in the world and how to think about the world. So I think you laid that out beautifully using form follows function and using the concepts that we've been learning about, orientation, the OODA loop. All of these ideas are essentially how to understand the world around us. And that's what these religions are seeking to do, and in their own different way. So to understand the commonalities, the principles by which they're actually functioning, and then what the way we are operating with them is incredibly important. And it's something that I hope that we continue to explore, because I think we'll see a lot more commonalities as we go on. And as soon as we finish these works, I think maybe another meetup on this would be really great. And the illustrations were fantastic in helping us understand as well the I-thou relationship. So thank you very much. Great
Thanks.
session.
Thanks, Joe. And we will definitely will be doing kind of more meetups like this. What I first want to do is I want to do these meetups that cover the entire of the Gospel of John, entire of Tao Te Ching. So next weekend, folks, on Jan 2nd at 2:00, we're doing a meetup on the entire Gospel of John. And hopefully very soon we'll do one on the entire Tao Te Ching. It's a little too early for the entire Bhagavad Gita, but I think those two we can do fairly in short time. And then we will go ahead and do additional meetups. I want to do it on a more, this one I've just presented my thoughts on it. I'm going to come up with meetups where we'll do kind of more discussion-oriented meetups on this. All right, thanks, Joe. Really appreciate that. Next up is going to be Shane Murray, Kevin, Jyoti, and Allison. Shane Murray.
Yes, thank you. I really appreciated this meetup, and I just wanted to say I do think there's a continuous breaking in of life on our individual lives, and I also suspect that there is a breaking in that we must do upon life itself. And once we find ourselves there, this kind of mutual interaction with life breaking in on us and us breaking in on life, it seems to be the sweet spot where we'll find ourselves well. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Shane Murray. Great observation. Next up is Kevin, Jyoti, and Allison. Kevin.
Yeah, thank you, Surya, for your beautiful diagram. I'm going to give you just one name, all in one. And it's OEM of 52 living idea. OEM stands for original equipment manufacturer. I hope you like it.
Thank you. Thank you, Kevin. Next up is going to be Jyoti, followed by Allison. Jyoti.
Yeah, thank you, Shrikant. The illustrations were out of this world, and they make you understand very explicitly everything. But I had to say this, that I do not consider Gita or Tao as religion. I think they are ways of life. There is spirituality. There's a higher order thinking. It's a higher powers. It's how the life should be dealt with. And it helps you to cope with life a little bit better. If you don't have this background in you, then you are a little helter-skelter. So you have to have some foundation in you. And for that matter, these two are very good. I do not know too much about Christianity, and I can speak about it. Thank you.
Thank you. Definitely. I mean, I'm new to Christianity too, but I find that it is the same. It's doing the same things for people, and they have had profound impact on people and on cultures and on civilizations. So I think there is a lot to be learned by going back to them, in their original, trying to commune with them and trying to speak out what we get from them. So wonderful. Thank you. Next up is Allison.
Thanks, Shrikant. This is really, really helpful. One thing I noticed in your diagrams was a real theme of opposition, which I thought was interesting because I know the theme of tomorrow's Design Way chapter is opposition. So I thought that was really interesting that I hadn't noticed before as I've been reading the text. So thanks for that.
Thank you. Thank you, Allison. The kind of bringing together of seeming opposites. See, there is a very deep idea that Aquinas has. What happens is that the modern thinking thinks in terms of contradictions. So A and not A. Whereas this thinking deals with contraries, basically things which are different from each other, but both need each other in order to function. So this is all kind of built on contraries. So the spirit is contrary to matter. It's not contradictory. And they're actually complementary. They need each other, like yin and yang. They are contraries. They are not contradictories. They need each other and they work only if the other is present. So it's all kind of, it's a way of thinking about how something is put together. All right, folks, thank you very much. This was wonderful. And thank you for great questions and comments. Always appreciate that. And we will see you soon. Bye.